CrateDB is a multi-model database. Its strength lies in the efficient handling of multiple data models within the same database and even within the same table. This includes structured data such as tables, time series, and geospatial, semi-structured data, for example JSON documents, and unstructured data, including text, binaries, images, videos, or vectors. All of these data models can be combined in the same record and accessed via SQL. This allows for complex queries and searches over all of your data. In this video, we'll explore some multi-model queries and introduce a couple of new concepts. Let's get started. Here's a multi-model query using the community areas dataset. And here's the table schema for the community areas table. The details field is an object with a defined schema of its own. Recall that CrateDB also supports dynamic schemas for objects and that all fields will be indexed, ensuring the best query performance. Inside the details object, the description field is stored as text, with full text indexing. Don't forget that vector and hybrid searches are also possible with CrateDB. Boundaries is defined as a GeoShape. Shapes can be specified as GeoJSON or in well-known text format. This query returns the community area name and population for community areas whose boundaries intersect a line that represents the path of a flight between Chicago's O'Hare Airport and the smaller Midway Airport, and whose description text matches the term historic and which have a population exceeding 30,000 people.